This is a message to the saints. The table has been set, so take your place. There is no more condemnation. There is only grace.
Growth Radio, Gospel Radio. Our way to heaven. Growth Radio, Gospel Radio. Our way to heaven. One king and one kingdom making people feel like family.
Growth Radio is growing with a new program, Interview with the Authors. Local authors, regional authors, international authors, new authors, and well-seasoned authors too. Join us every Thursday evening from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. AST. We're interviewing authors, and who knows, next time we'll be interviewing you. Interview with the Authors every Thursday evening, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. on growthradiopt.com.
Growth Radio. Growth Radio. Growth Radio. Growth Radio.
And welcome, Growth Radio listeners, to another segment of Interview with the Authors. We are here every Thursday evening from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. And we have a special guest this evening. He is well known in Trinidad and Tobago. He is well loved as well. And many of you may have already met him, and some of you may not have met him. But today we have the opportunity to speak and chat with this special guest of mine. He is an ordained minister of religion. He is a licensed marriage officer. He is a specialized addiction recovery counselor. He is a graduate of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, and he holds certification in social work. He also has a double major degree in sociology and psychology. On top of that, he's coming with 35 years experience in state social services, among many other things. He is a father, he is a friend, he is a husband, he is a pastor. He's so many things to so many people, and we are so happy to have him with us. Who is he? Who is this person I'm talking about? This is none other than Pastor Wilhelm Joseph. Welcome, Pastor Joseph, to Growth Radio's Interview with the Authors.
Thank you for having me. A pleasant day, everyone.
Awesome, awesome. So today, this is a different forum that Pastor Wilhelm and I find ourselves in. we usually in a more familiar setting, a more familiar environment. He is one of the pastors at the church where I am a member, and we are very, very happy, and we're also very proud of Pastor Wilhelm, because Pastor Wilhelm is here with me to talk about his first book. This is your first book, is it, Pastor Wilhelm?
Yes, it is my first book.
Awesome, awesome. And we are so proud of you, Pastor Wilhelm. It is called The Journey Out, the Damascus Experience. And, it's not a small deal, this book. It's not a small issue, this book coming out at this time. But I want to hear from Pastor Wilhelm. Pastor, why? I have so many questions to ask you, but let's start with the why.
Right.
Why this book? Why now? Why now?
Why now? Because I believe the Lord spoke to me and said, Wilhelm, this book that you have been writing for over 10 years, this book that I have placed in your heart for over 10 years, now is the appropriate time to release it. Hence, it has been released. That's the why now.
Okay, that's a short why, right? So 10 years, you said 10 years. So why did it take so long? What was happening during those 10 years?
Well, during those 10 years, it was preparation. What has happened is that this book is out of life experience. So therefore, it would require years of life experience to produce this book. And over the years, I have witnessed the impact of addictions upon many lives and upon many families. During the course of that, I realized that people are out there hurting. People are out there crying out for help. And when I speak about addictions, I'm not only speaking about substance addictions, because addiction comes in different forms. They include behaviors and practices such as gambling, pornography, sex, overly aggressive acts. All of these are part of addictions. And the book I wrote is not just for addictions, but for negative lifestyle practices. You know, I have seen where families are torn apart because a loved one is involved in an addiction or a negative lifestyle. And they need help. They're looking for help. Not only that, there are many out there who are into the practice of addictive behaviors. And they are crying out for a way out. They are crying out for some way to stop. And what happens is that while that is extremely urgent upon the part of the addict or the one practicing the negative lifestyle, somehow the triggers and the urges and the cravings become very overpowering, that all their attempts at stopping that practice results in failure. And they become desperate. They become disenchanted. Some even decide, look, how am I going to succeed? And just revert into a deeper life of addictions, a deeper life of negative practices, because they see no hope of stopping. And experiencing these things around, it has really kind of nudged me, hey, now is the time to release this book. This book is about recovery. Recovery from addictions and negative lifestyle practices. This is what the book is all about.
Wow, that is awesome, Pastor Willem. That is awesome, because I think it's a book that is in great need. I mean, there are other books about addiction, but this is for from a Trinidad and Tobago person, and we are very happy to have that, because you have that experience in Trinidad and Tobago, living here, dealing with Trinbagonian addicts and recovering addicts as well, right? But even before we go even deeper into the book, Pastor Wilhelm, all of those accolades that I mentioned at the beginning, I mean, all of those things are wonderful. And, you know, it speaks of something even more than this, because you weren't born a minister of religion, were you?
Yeah, I'm laughing. You know, many people know me today, but are unaware of that journey I took.
Yeah.
You know, where it all began.
Yes.
You know, and no, I wasn't born a pastor.
You weren't born a pastor.
I had my life outside there in the world,
okay,
which included addiction. I was a cocaine addict for over 15 years.
Wow, over 15 years, you said?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Cocaine was my drug of choice.
I see.
And that's where it came out of.
Okay, so that's very interesting. So you were a cocaine addict. So how did you become a cocaine addict?
It started off way back as a teenager. One of the things that you have to recognize, nobody wakes up and decide, I want to be an addict. But it's out of what they may have experienced. And addiction and negative lifestyle practices develop over time. But they are not what I will call someone deciding and structuring their life to be that. Addiction and negative lifestyle practices sometimes come out of traumatic experiences someone may have gone through. They also come out of social and environmental conditioning. And over the years, patterns develop that eventually become explosive with these forms of behaviors. For example, I started off just relaxing through having a good smoke, you know, having a good drink, you know, because sometimes addiction starts through curiosity, let's say, as a young person, you know, and peer group pressure. And I wouldn't even say peer group pressure, but having peers and experimenting on various things. And that is how it started off with me, you know, as well as coming out of a broken home environment. You know, at the age of 13, when there was that split in my home and not having a father figure, it impacted upon me. And I began searching for some form of comfort. And it started off just smoking with the boys on the block, looking for elder persons that will fill that role as father figure. And the comfort of being high kind of nullified the pain of anger and disappointment and, you know, of father not being there. And it started off that as a form of comfort.
Okay.
And then it began to escalate.
Mm-hmm.
The thing too with you see, nobody knows beforehand if taking drugs or taking drinks or getting involved in these things, you can stop it immediately. No one knows beforehand whether if I smoke, I wouldn't get addicted. You know, so it's always a risk. It's always a risk involved. To some people, you know, it may be hereditary, they may have family members who may be in it, and, you know, they're more susceptible to become. But for others, you don't know. And as teenagers, we were just involved in smoking marijuana, then trying out different medications to see how we would feel. And interestingly, this is something I always share. We were a group. We were going to school together and we were involved together. And interestingly, hear this. One of the members of the group, just like all of us, we were taking the same thing. And this one member took the same thing and never recovered. This one member
never recovered. Do you mean he died or he just went off the
He went
event?
off. He went
Okay.
off the edge.
Okay.
And had to be hospitalized and was never himself again.
Wow. So he lost his mind.
He lost his mind.
Wow.
So all
wow.
of us were in it together. So that's to tell you that you're not too sure who.
Right. It's like
You're
Russian roulette.
You understand? And that is what happened with us. And we just kept on going. And then cocaine came on the scene and I was the one that grabbed at it. In those days, it wasn't like as it is today, you know, the crack cocaine or the rocks as we call them. It was more, you know, the powder form. And I began sniffing cocaine. And it just progressed. It just progressed. You know, in certain circles, it has been shared that Trinidad was one of the first countries to develop the crack cocaine, what we used to call rock, that is now mad all over the place. That's in some circles, that's for another story. And that crack cocaine really got me. And there was no turning back after that. I didn't want no other drugs but that. And I became a slave to cocaine. I was literally at one time walking on my all fours, looking at every little white thing on the ground and figuring it's cocaine.
You lie.
I'm telling you, that's where I reached. So when I see the vagrant, they're going in the dustbin and eating, I say, for the grace of God.
You could relate, you understand.
Because I could remember warming some empty containers. You know, some of the addicts, we will go and get some empty containers from the back of the restaurants and make a meal. Yes. So when you see me today and you say, Pastor, you don't know where I came from.
Yeah, think again.
Oh my Lord.
Again, he might just know.
It's a whole progression. It's a whole progression with addiction.
Right.
You know, so having experienced that and now dealing with families going through that experience, I know. I have seen my mother looking more sick than me out of concern for my addiction, she get more thin, and I mean, she was more addict. She looked more like an addict than me. And I have seen families suffering the same way today.
Oh my goodness. So it doesn't only, so addiction does not only affect the addict, is what you're saying.
It affects the entire family household, and each one is affected differently. So that is what you may have some just reject everybody, and have some just go into depression. It's a family disease. When one member becomes addicted, and let's not just talk about drug addiction.
Yeah.
Let's talk about addiction and negative lifestyle practices. Because in like manner, I have to counsel individuals where certain members of the family are now involved in what I call a negative lifestyle practice, not a drug addiction. And the impact is the same upon that family. It's the same. And that individual goes through the same sort of things, trying to come out, trying to stop. Many people are fighting out there trying to stop an addiction or stop a negative lifestyle practice, and they can't, they don't know what to do. And this book, The Journey Out, The Damascus Experience, it outlines a step-by-step approach to overcome these practices.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. To God be the glory for this book.
To God be the glory.
And, you know, you raised many very, very valuable and valid points. I mean, I'm sure we won't be able to cover all of them in this short interview, but I do want to encourage persons to go and get their book. Just before we go on, Pastor William, could you tell persons where they can get this book?
This book is presently available at all CLC book outlets as well as in Tobago. It's also available at Christian booksellers on Edward Street. It's also at Maranatha Bookshop and Gift Shop in San Fernando, that's Root Avenue. So it's also on Amazon, both in paperback and Kindle version.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And again, congratulations on this book, Pastor William.
Thank you.
And, you know, you mentioned so many details that I wish I could take them one by one and really talk about each one of them because they're so valid. But one of the things that you mentioned just a while ago, and it's also mentioned in your book, you talk about family. So let's talk a little bit more about family, if we may. Who is your family?
Who is my family?
Yeah.
My family is big. I have the family that bore me and brought me out. My mother and father deceased, my sisters, and I have my family, my wife and my daughter. I have my family, that is those that I am out there helping. So, you know, tell doctors, just say who is my family. I mean, everybody, you remember Lord Nelson? All of we is one family. And that is it. You have to look out for each other. And my family life, you know, was between Trinidad and Tobago because I was born in Tobago. You know, I grew up in Trinidad, but I spent a lot of time going back to Tobago. I love Tobago because my family at that time in Tobago had an estate with a lot of fruit trees. I love just to wake up on a morning and spend the whole day just in the estate, walking, listening to the birds, eating fruits. That was
like a piece of Eden, right?
Oh yes, oh yes. And then in Trinidad, you know, I grew up in Pity Valley, all right. And then I had my next grandmother was living in Belmont, so I was also in Belmont. So I had family all around.
Okay.
I had family all around, you know. But in spite of that, when I got into addiction, my family became the addicts. So you see how it switched? What I mean is that having my father leave home, having my mother as a single parent fighting to keep us together, you know, I went out into the world then. And I began to hook up and associate myself, quote unquote, with what I will now consider my family. You know,
Okay.
those who were involved in practicing the same behavior I was practicing, many too had the same hurts that went through and disappointments in their own, immediate family. So that became my family. And in the same manner, coming out of addiction now, I had to look for a new family. And that is the thing, You see, support groups are very important as we go through life. And what we have to recognize with support groups as we go through life is when the help and assistance of that support group has come to an end. And when it's time to sever ties, say goodbye, and move on. So there are the immediate family that will be the support group forever. But then as we grow and as we develop, we meet others, we meet groups that come that basic family or support group to carry you from point A to point B. And when you reach point B, know that, hello, bye-bye. I have to get a new family, a new support group to carry me further.
Wow. Okay.
And this is something that we go through in life. As I described in my book, life is a journey.
Yeah.
And we journey through life. The home is a journey in itself. The school environment is another journey in itself. And in the book, I describe it as we are tourists on this life journey. And as we go through life, we collect souvenirs, and sometimes we pick up a virus. And the souvenirs are the things we cherish. You ever go to a foreign country and you pick up something just to show this where I went?
Yes.
And you bring it back home, a souvenir.
Yeah.
But then again, somebody may sneeze next day. Well, oh gosh, in these days and days, sometimes somebody sneezes what's going on. That's the virus. And life is like that. As we go through life, as we journey through this life, we meet and interact with others. And that in itself becomes part of our experience.
Yes. And you're very right. Because we live in a world with other people, it's very difficult not to interact with viruses or not to interact with the negative. But it's how you deal with it, how you react to the negative things that come your way, that present themselves to you, however they do. So you said you went down on, that is amazing. You were on all fours. I'm just thinking of Nebuchadnezzar, right? You're on all fours. You weren't even human, just because of this drug. But let me ask this next question. Does Trinidad and Tobago have an addiction problem?
Not only Trinidad and Tobago. It's worldwide. But it isn't something that the powers to be will put up as advertisements, but it's there. There is a drug culture that exists in many countries. Trinidad and Tobago, yes, we have a drug problem.
Okay.
And it has grown out of hand because it has brought along with it the violence and the illegal arms and ammunition, which is that is now being highlighted in recent times, because it is the same lines that are being used as transshipment. The same lines that were used in the early just for drugs, it's now being used for both drugs and guns. But let us not go that way. That is another conversation.
All right.
But the drug culture is here.
Yeah.
Within our country.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned that. And yeah, of course, experiences like this are common in a lot of different countries. But our country is so small. I don't think we can afford, to let something like this, just fester, and in your book, one of the things that you mentioned in your book, that you were introduced to this lifestyle because it was a pleasure-seeking behavior. And you mentioned it just a while ago, you were seeking comfort. You were in pain, you had emotional pain, pain that the doctors would not be able to see just by looking at you, just by putting you under some kind of tester, MRI or whatever it is, They can't see that, but it was a present, it was a very present and very real pain that you sought comfort, you sought an answer, you sought to address it in negative ways.
That's right.
Did you know that it was negative to go to what you did?
Well, that is the thing. You see, as individuals, as we look for comfort in certain drugs or behaviors, we don't see it as negative when it is in fact given that immediate ease to the discomfort.
Right.
Now, the thing is that not only addictions, but negative lifestyle practices, as I said, they develop over time. And let me give an example, not just looking at the use of drugs. My wife is a former teacher. And I remember in our early marriage, we would come home and discuss, how our day was. So she was explaining to me about, at that time, she was teaching the infant department. And she's explaining to me an incident that took place in her class. So she said, handboy, that this little boy, 7-year-old, and every day he is beating up on this young girl in the class. So she asked the 7-year-old boy by name, why are you only beating up on so-and-so? Call the girl by her name. He says, Miss, I like her. So when my wife told me, I said, here, what is going on? That little 7-year-old boy is living in an abusive environment. Talk to his mother. And a couple of weeks later, my wife came home and she related the conversation she had in private with the boy's mother. And she said, I spoke to the boy's mother and she broke down in tears as she related the abusive relationship she is living in with the boy's father. Here it is. This 7-year-old boy is witnessing at home his father beating his mother. But he's also seeing and hearing what takes place in the night in the small home they live in. How the mommy and daddy enjoying each other, they love each other. So from 7 years old, he is forming this practice to demonstrate love to a female. I must beat her. 7-year-old. Now to him, that is a souvenir he's picking up on a journey during his home environment. To him, that behavior, what he's seeing home, nothing wrong with it. He's doing it in school. But as he grows, it becomes a negative. Well, it is a negative. It is a negative lifestyle practice. But to that 7-year-old boy seeing that, see what happens? Let me give you another example. I remember when I now began to work, there was this beautiful young lady who was the manager's personal secretary. I was working in a firm. And I like her. She was a nice person. So the fellas would tell me, boy, she easy, and they're talking and things. And they're explaining to me that although she has this beautiful job, she also has a night job. I said, what? They said, yeah, she works in the night as well in a club. I said, what? That beautiful secretary who has everything, money, home, everything? They say, yes. And over the time working there, on our lunchtime, we would sit down in the lunchroom and I got friendly with her and we would chat. She was chatting with me. Hear what she related to me. She said when she was a child, she was molested and sexually abused in her home by male relatives as a child. She has grown up. The hurt and the pain of that memory, she never got over. But when she goes and do that nightlife, it eases the discomfort. So that negative lifestyle practice of promiscuity was easing the discomforts, the emotional wounds that she is going through. So you find that it's not just addiction, it's not just drugs. Sometimes people develop negative coping mechanisms for traumas. Sometimes they develop these styles of behaviors because of what they see and they hear. So there are different facets involved in an individual becoming an addict or being involved in other negative lifestyle practices. It's not just from a traumatic experience. Sometimes it's through association. Sometimes it's through culture. You understand? But as they grow and as they develop, the souvenirs now become viruses. And they are battling to try to stop. You don't stop these things. What you have to do is to break the cycle. And the book, The Journey Out, the Damascus Experience, explains that.
And there are lots of cycles, you know, those two examples that you gave, Pastor Willem, are they isolated incidents?
Well, they are not isolated incidents. I just gave those two examples to share with you how someone could develop these practices. You understand? On one incident is the little boy who's seeing what's happening in the home, and he believes it's the right thing. In the other case, is someone who went through a trauma and is looking for ways of dealing with the emotional wounds they are still feeling.
Yes. And what I'm saying is those are not isolated incidents. There are many Trinidad and Tobago nationals and persons around the world that have exactly that experience and are experiencing it right now.
That's right.
You know, so we actually, because of that cycle that you mentioned, you know, children and children's children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, they are going through the same trauma because there has not been an intervention. And I would like to present Pastor Willem's book, The Journey Out, the Damascus Experience, as an intervention. If perhaps you have a family member who is going through that, or you yourself are going through that, you know, check the book out, And also, Pastor Willem, you are a counselor, you are a social worker.
That's right.
You are qualified and experienced in counseling these situations. How can someone who is hurting reach for help without being judged or without being condemned?
First of all, they are available in Trinidad and Tobago rehabilitation centers. I am also make myself available. I can give you my number, 713-4756. 713-4756. You can also email me at williamjoe@hotmail.com. You know, and one of the things that I recognize, and with the title of the book, The Damascus Experience, I was looking at the life of Apostle Paul. And it really hit me that he didn't born an apostle, you know. He had a lifestyle before. And his lifestyle was based on what I will term overly aggressive behaviors. He was involved, it's in the book of Acts, he was involved in persecuting Christians. He was beating up people, pulling them out of their house. And the scripture has it, I mean, he was like a madman. He was behaving in a way and like he couldn't stop it. He was just going, just looking for Christians. Pick up. And interestingly, the account has it is that he met Jesus and his whole life changed. And that impacted upon me of the lifestyle of Paul before he met Jesus. And I always say that his lifestyle was similar to that of having an addictive practice or a negative lifestyle practice. He was involved in some behaviors that were questionable and like he couldn't stop. He also had the support of others. And furthermore, the conversation of the day in his era was supporting his behaviors. Just like today, there are people involved in all sorts of behaviors, and the conversation of the day supporting, they have people supporting, but many times it could be negative lifestyles. But it's when Apostle Paul met Jesus, his whole life was transformed.
And I want to put a pin there, Pastor Willem, because it really, I want people to understand there are two different pathways there. And I really want people to get this. Pastor Willem is talking about Saul, before he became the Apostle Paul, the lifestyle he led, and it was a lifestyle of religion. It was one where he was zealously promoting his religion of the day. And what if you are hearing what Pastor Willem is saying is that while Saul, before he became Paul, was a religious zealot, his life changed when he met Jesus. So I want you all to understand that there is a difference between religion and Christ and Jesus Christ. All right, there is a difference. And so even with that, Pastor, is religion, so are you saying that religion can be an addiction?
Some people go off on the edge.
Like Paul did.
Some people go off on the edge. And it's not about religion. I always say it's about your relationship with Christ. Your relationship with Christ. And the thing about Paul, I focus more on what happened, what could have caused Paul, beside being educated and zealous, what could have been one of the triggers for his behavior? And I refer to the death of Stephen. Stephen was very zealous and for Christ. And the Apostle Paul at that time, Saul, he witnessed the death of Stephen. And it was from that point that, they put for want of another word, like he tripped. Like he tripped. And he just went on a rampage after that incident. So I question, did that incident that he experienced have any bearing on his behaviors? And I did it in a form of a spoken word within the book. Where I did it in the form of a spoken word, where I made this poem just came directly down and I just wrote it.
Well, let's hear some of it. Let's hear some of it.
Let me share it with you. It is called Let's Ride. Let's Ride. That's the title of the spoken word. You know, and it's about how Saul, the Apostle Paul, came in to these behaviors. Here it goes. He left home with all good intentions of completing his daily chores. His mind was focused. An unusual sound in the distance gained his undivided attention. With curiosity, he approached in its direction. The crowd increased to what was now an overwhelming, vociferous jeer. Like the woman with an issue, he lunged forward, gaining a vantage view. From there, he saw Stephen, not much older than he. The glow upon him was amazing, and his voice was assured and convincing. He stood in their midst alone, proclaiming that Jesus was king. The crowd screamed in anger. With reddened eyes, they blocked their ears, and lips all curled into evil sneers. Some approached the young man with a demanding request to keep their apparel. They were down to their vests. As they turned to leave his presence, in one swinging motion, they grabbed the larger of the loose foundation. They hurled the bricks at Stephen. Still speaking, he looked up to heaven. The missiles hit him with bone-crushing precision. Flesh tore away and blood splattered as Stephen fell to the ground. The crowd raised their voices in an all-agreeing defiant song. Yeah! As they dispersed, he left there that day with an uncomfortable feeling. He felt the voiceless cry deep inside of agony, pain, grief, and sorrow. A fear gripped this young man as he walked alone, thinking of his tomorrow. He looked around and listened in his neighborhood, but there was no one to concurrently share those thoughts and feelings of what he heard and saw. The flashbacks were all so near. Switching through his social media, looking for relief, what became shocking was the escalating likes, as no one shared his grief. No, not one stood in defense of Stephen. With seemingly no way to cope with this emotional distress inside, the young man joined in with his peers to ease all his fears. Fears of being different, fear of being alone, fear of sharing how he truly felt, fear of feeling that feeling, fear of standing for what is right, fear of rejecting what is wrong. So he joined with his peers as his major way to cope with all the emotional trauma. Yes, side by side, let's ride. And this is a spoken word on what happened to Saul, the Apostle Paul. And that ride is when he took the journey into Damascus. He was on his way to Damascus.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Pastor Lam. And, you know, in the book you said it's by Joe Lam. So that is, Joe Lam is your
poetic name.
Your poetic name. Okay. All right. And there are quite a number of spoken words from Jolam, from our pastor in the book. And if you just joined us, we are speaking to Pastor Wilhelm Joseph. He is the author of the new book, The Journey Out, the Damascus Experience. And it is a short read, but a very impactful and powerful read. It's only a little over 90 pages, and you have just about 7 chapters with lots and lots of information, lots and lots of nuggets of wisdom. And, it is his story. It is a book for persons who, like him, have conquered or have lived a life of addiction. Doesn't have to be drug addiction, but a life of addiction. And as he mentions it, negative lifestyle choices. All right. And we want to encourage you to get a copy of this book, The Journey Out, the Damascus Experience by Wilhelm Joseph. And again, Pastor, could you tell us where we could get this book again?
This book is available at all CLC bookstores nationwide, as well as in Tobago. It's also available at Christian booksellers on Edward Street, Port of Spain. It's at Maranatha Bookstore, Root Street, San Fernando.
Yeah.
It's also on Amazon in
Yes.
paperback and Kindle version.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And if you need to call him, if you need to talk to him, you can find him on 868-713-4756. That's 868-713-4756. And Pastor, very importantly, you mentioned that community that addicts find themselves, and they find themselves in a community of negativity, of negative behavior, because human beings are social. We are meant to be in relationships with one another. God is a family himself, and he longs for relationship, and he has placed that in us, that longing to belong, that longing for relationship, that longing for community, that longing for acceptance. Yeah. And you mentioned that the addicts, you were just looking for a place to belong. You found people who had the same hurts and the same pain, were going through the same similar traumas, and they all just gelled. It was like a magnet, right?
That's right.
It was like a magnet. You all formed a community of instability and lots of other
I like that one.
lots of other things and lots of other things. But there's the thing is, it's a vicious cycle, because there's a market that needs you. There's a market that needs addicts. Mm-hmm. There is a market that thrives, that gets its wealth from addiction.
That's right.
So how do we get out of this? I mean, even as a nation, because as you said earlier, that this addiction, it impacts the family, and the family is the bedrock of society. So if the family is impacted negatively, where is the hope? Where is the hope for us?
The hope is in our relationship with the Lord. That is where it begins. As families, we have a responsibility for each other, but we are not alone. Why are we here? Why are we here? What is our purpose in life? It's important that, you ask yourself that question. And as an individual, for example, in my case, I realized, coming out of this, I realized that God had a plan for me. God had a plan for me, but I didn't know that. It's only, I could recall, it was while I was in the rehab center that my therapist asked me, what do you want to do with life? What is your plans? What career? And it was for the first time what? Career? Life? I was just living day to day to get high. And that was, after a number of years, that is all I could have been thinking about. My next fix, drugs, where? So for the first time, I had to really study, what career do I want to get involved in? And it is the therapist herself that said, Wilhelm, from all you have shared with us, from going through your life history, from your observations, how the nurses are interacting with you, how you are interacting with the other clients, you should think about social work. And I mean, she spoke to me in such a calm, her tone, everything, it caught me. And that was the first time I began to think about my future. What I want to be, what I want to do. And having left the rehab center, I gave it more thought as to what should I do as a career. And that's how I managed to get into social work.
Okay.
For the first time I began to actually,
think,
introspect and think.
Yes.
And I remember an incident where I had picked up a friend and I was going home in Pity Valley, and I picked up this friend somewhere in Woodbrook waiting on transport. And he jumped in the car and we're going home. So now I'm recovered, but I'm now growing. And this friend began to relate to me his intention of getting divorced. So he was outpouring to me all the reasons why he should get divorced. Man, and he paint a picture of negativity about his wife. I driving and listening to him, going down the road. And when he reached about 4, he said, so, Lem, what you think? Well, just call me Lem. Sure. Lem, what you think, boy? I turn and I call him by name. I say, so and so, boy, you have a good wife, boy. Don't get divorced. He watched me so, and I give him some reasons. After he painted the bad picture, and he watched me, and as he watched me, the Spirit of God quickened me and said, listen to what he's going and say. And he watched me, and he said, Lem boy, I will take your advice. You know why? No, he's one from way back, we dealing together with drugs and things. He said, you know why? I say, why? He said, since we small growing up, you're the only one used to give me good advice.
Oh, wow.
And that hit me for 6. So even during my times of active addiction, there was something in me. But all of us have something in us. But how do we discover it? What is our purpose here? We have gifts and we have skills that are there, but they are only come to manifestation when we could pause and say, Lord, tell me. Just like the Apostle Paul, when he met Jesus on that road to Damascus, he said, Lord, tell me what you want me to do. What is my plan? What is my purpose in life? And then Jesus said, go to Damascus and spend 3 days on Straight Street. In the book I spoke about Straight Street being the rehab center. That was Paul's rehab center. That was Paul's place of conversion. But he had to pull away from his former lifestyle. And many times we have to pull away from our addictions or negative lifestyles and get before God.
That's right. And
all of us need that time to pull away.
Yeah.
You see, and addictions and negative lifestyles, one of the things in recovery, they say one of the first stages in recovery is abstinence. Or, abstaining from whatever it was you're doing. And it is during that phase you begin to come to terms with, Lord, what do you want me to do? What it is? Why am I here? What is my purpose?
Yeah.
And as family, sometimes we have to pull away and ask, as a family, why are we here? What is our purpose?
Right. That's a good question.
Yeah, we all have to ask ourselves that question.
That's a good question. That's a good question. And I really like, that the scripture, it really, it shows us, it demonstrates that, Paul, he didn't go into our church. He went to Jesus he had to spend that time face to face with God
That's right.
himself.
Himself.
And
One
that
on
is
one.
what God wants for all of us.
All of
He
us,
wants
all of
that
us.
one-on-one, right, Pastor?
That's right. That's right.
And so, another beautiful thing that you have in your book is the power of prayer, that there were persons who were praying for you while you were an addict. Tell us
I'm
about
telling
that.
you, no, many times people overlook this important principle in addiction recovery and recovering from negative lifestyle practices. Prayer. In my instance, my mother sought help while I was actively out there. And she had a group of people in the church that she was attending at the time, praying for me. They didn't know me, but they were praying for me. They were praying for a name. They were praying for Carmen, Joseph's son. Cherise, they were praying for years. You hearing me? They were praying for years. And as a matter of fact, when I realized that my mother had people praying for me, is then I trying to prove to them it wouldn't work. I'm serious. It wouldn't work. And I was more, just to show them that ain't gonna work. But my mother, she never gave up. And that is a word I want us to speak right now to all of you out there who have addictive loved ones, who have loved ones practicing negative behaviors. Don't give up. There is always hope. And my mother had these people praying, and it was, it wasn't little prayer, it was strategic, organized prayer. And I sometimes will speak about probably another time. It was strategic and organized prayer that they were into for me. Years after, people came up to me and said, "You are Carmen Joseph's son. We used to be praying for you."
Wow.
I'm telling you.
That's amazing.
As a matter of fact, my wife was part of the prayer group that my mother had praying for me. As I said in the book, she didn't even know she was praying for her husband. You understand? But they prayed, they continued. They prayed without ceasing for years. And the breakthrough came. The breakthrough came.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to encourage, those who have loved ones involved. Get 2 or 3 people, get people who will, who will agree with you in prayer.
Right.
Not people just gossip and say, "Oh God, so and so son and drugs, oh God, so and so doing so." No. Good people. You have to identify. It ain't everybody can do this.
Right.
And you have to be consistent. The effectual, fervent prayers of the righteous availeth much. You have to pray without ceasing. Set times, specific times. They used to go into fasting. All that for me while I was out there.
They loved you. That's love.
That's love. That's love. And it's important that, we recognize that people out there hurting. And you see a hurting family member, sometimes they still hurting, somebody they can't even pray for themselves. But prayer is certainly an important aspect in the recovery process.
I am so glad. Wow, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you said that, because there are lots of families. There are lots of families who they just don't know what to do. And I'm glad you gave that strategy. Prayer is a strategic way of winning back your family members, winning back your husband, your loved ones, your children. A lot of persons might gawk at it, they might, make fun of it, but it is what it is. God has given us that weapon to win back our family members. And he answers prayer. Look at Pastor William. He is a testament to the effectiveness of prayer.
I mean, look at Peter was in his prison And the church
Yeah.
was praying, you understand?
Yes, yes, and he was released. He was free. He was delivered, right?
Mhm.
But I'm so glad that you brought that up. I'm so glad you are a success story, and we've run out of time, unfortunately. But I hope to have you back again, Pastor William, to talk a little bit more about your book, the journey out the Damascus Road experience. This is William Joseph's first book. I hope it's not going to be the last. And it is about his experience. It is also a resource for those who are addicts, who are fighting, who are struggling, who have family members who are struggling with an addiction, not only drug addiction. And we want you to get a copy of it. But Pastor William, with the last few minutes that we have, could you perhaps give a little bit, give us another poem of yours from Jolam? Did you want to give a little piece? It doesn't have to be the whole one.
Let me put it this. Okay. I will just share this one. This is a very short one.
Yeah.
He gave you to share. This is what the Lord just download on me. It goes like this. When his love is in your heart, you won't think twice to help someone make a new start. Although they may look all lost, torn, and battered, could you recall when your life and dreams once being totally shattered? But he took you in his arms and gave you all his love and care. Yes, that is now in your heart, not to keep, but to share.
Amen and amen. So beautiful, Pastor Willem. And I have to give a round of applause. All right. Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. And we hope to have you back again. This has been Interview with the Authors. We have been interviewing the author, William Joseph, on his first book, The Journey Out the Damascus Experience. And we want to say congratulations, Pastor William. So until next time, Growth Radio listeners, we have to say goodbye, but not for long. So until next time, God bless you. Have an awesome weekend and see you back for next time on Interview with the Authors next Thursday, please God, from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. AST. Good night, everybody. Good night, Pastor.
Good night, and thanks for having me.
No problem.
Growth Radio is growing with a new program, Interview with the Authors. Local authors, regional authors, international authors, new authors, and well-seasoned authors too. Join us every Thursday evening from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. AST. We're interviewing authors, and who knows, next time we'll be interviewing you. Interview with the Authors every Thursday evening, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. on growthradiott.com.
Growth Radio.
Growth Radio. Growth Radio. Growth Radio. This is a message to the saints. The table has been set, so take your place. There is no more condemnation. There is only grace.
Growth Radio, Gospel Radio. Our way to heaven. Growth Radio, Gospel Radio. Our way to heaven. One king and one kingdom making people feel like family.